Hello, and welcome back for another episode of Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma. I am joined today by my very gorgeous mini me, who does not think she is my mini me. So, did you see the evil eye there? Katie Westbrook. And shortly we will be joined by Mason and my very handsome son, who was conceived with 2 sperms, Hayden Westbrook. We also have Henry in the house again because his separation anxiety is intense. I don't think we have any announcements for today, and we are really super excited to bring our teens on the air with you to talk about their experiences with baptisms for the dead, which is most commonly done. It's an ordinance, or Mason, correct me if I'm wrong. It's an ordinance, right? An ordinance in the temple that is done usually by our teenagers. So if you have any tips for us, please feel free to, there we go, there's my finger, email us at daisygirlcommunications.com, or the other kind of tips, this way, the other kind of tips via Venmo right there on the screen. So we love hearing from our audience, and we would love to have any of the tips for making our show better, or the tips to help us continue to bring this content to you and continue to pay our staff a industry standard and livable income. You can shoot us some tips to the Venmo account. So, alrighty, let's begin. Thank you so much.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. So Mason, I know that you kind of prepared us, or prepared a little bit of history, a historicity of where the idea in Mormonism came from for baptisms for the dead. So why don't you go ahead and get us started?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just take a couple minutes to kind of fill in for those of you that were or are Mormon and maybe don't know that history, or for those of you that never have been Mormon, just so that you kind of have an understanding of where we're coming from as we talk about this. So in August of 1840, shortly after the the church had been kicked out of Missouri and moved to Nauvoo, Joseph Smith was preaching a sermon, and there was a sister there who had recently lost her son, who had not been baptized. And kind of off the cuff, which is actually kind of par for the course for Joseph Smith, as you'll kind of see down the road here, kind of off the cuff, just started preaching about how baptism can be done for the dead as well. And he referenced specifically 1 Corinthians 15:29, which says, kind of references baptism for the dead. It doesn't actually teach anything about baptism for the dead or say that it was appropriate or inappropriate, anything. It just says it uses baptism for the dead as a way to support the idea of the resurrection. Else, why are they then baptized for the dead if there be no resurrection? And so he referenced that. And after that meeting, they went down to the river and started doing baptisms for the dead. So in typical Joseph Smith fashion, he presented this idea and later on realized that, hey, we got to have some more control.
Doctrine and
we have some more doctrine built around it. Yeah.
Wait, so question more like, I need a better origin story for this rather than the off the cuff thing that I just taught. Like, what are your thoughts there?
So not so much a better origin story. Like, I don't think even from that point in time, there is any more scriptural evidence for baptism for the dead, aside from what Joseph Smith then provided. So there's a couple of chapters in the Doctrine and Covenants that kind of delineate it more. So he created his own doctrine to go along with it, but nothing that would be recognized by anybody outside of the church.
I think it's important to bring up here. So we are not historians by any means. But one of the things that we have learned about quite a bit, especially if you're tuning in to like Mormonism Live, Bill Reel, and RFM, where the prophecies from the Doctrine and Covenants, if you read like the Book of Commandments from the RLDS Church, or I think they're the Church of Christ now, versus the most current of the Doctrine and Covenants, you're going to see a lot of changes because Joseph Smith did have a history of going back and altering what the revelations, quote unquote, said in order to make the revelations come true after the fact. And we're not really going to talk a lot about that today. That's not our purpose for being here today. But we will do our best. Mason, I'm going to give you that assignment because I'll forget if I don't. Maybe finding the episodes or some of the source material where our listeners can absolutely log in and listen to those to reference what we are referring to right now.
Cool. I'll see if I can do that.
Yeah, the other thing that I wanted to shout out is that last time our viewers were messaging us while we were live. And what we have found is that I think it's the YouTube channel. We can see your messages, and the Daisy Girl Communications page, Facebook page, is where we can actually see the comments that you are writing to us as we go live. For some reason, we cannot see those comments unless you're either on the Daisy Girl Communications Facebook platform or the Unpacking with Sarah YouTube channel. So if you would like to chime in, that's the best way to do it. Otherwise, we may miss your comments, and I will do my best to track that in the background without becoming too distracted. So, okay, Mason, go ahead.
Right. So that was August of 1840. In January of 1841, so about 6 months later, Joseph Smith announced that the baptisms were meant to be done in the temple. And so then he announced that they're going to start working on the Nauvoo temple. Or I'm not sure if that was when he announced it or he just kind of brought them together. They may have been working on it before that. I don't remember the time period for that. But anyway, in January, he says, look, these are supposed to be done in the temple. In October of 1841, so now we're about 8 months after that announcement, he says, baptisms for the dead are suspended until the font in the temple is completed. So he kind of gave them this heads up. Hey, they're supposed to be done in the temple. 9 months later, he said, we're not doing these anymore until the font is completed. And the font was completed the very next month in November of 1841. And so they started doing the baptisms again. In September of 1842, so now we're 10 months later, he put in the Doctrine and Covenants 128, which is the section that really talks the most about baptism for the dead, with the exception of maybe section 138, which was the revelation given to Joseph F. Smith when he was the prophet. So this is where he kind of talks about baptisms, and he talks about other things too, but in that one, he really hounds on the fact that we need to do careful documentation. So for about 2 years, there was documentation. Probably what documentation they have is like from journals or things like that. Starting in September, they really started to pay close attention to the documentation. And then the final change that I have here is it was in July of 1845. So historically, this is about a year, actually almost exactly a year after Joseph Smith was killed. So Brigham Young, the Quorum of the 12 are in charge, though Brigham Young isn't technically the president of the church. He's in charge. And that's when the change was made that it would be gender specific. So prior to this time, so for about 5 years, men would be baptized for women, women would be baptized for men. There was no gender specificity. And actually, the only reason I really find that significant is it was about this time that they started giving out the other ordinances of the temple more universally. So prior to that time, it was kind of like you were invited in, a person here, a person there, a couple here, a couple there. Then here they started to do that to everybody. So everybody could have the endowment. Everybody could have the initiatory. Well, if you don't specify that those are gender specific, you can see how that might cause some issues. So Brigham Young then clarifies this is going to be gender specific now. It has to be man for man, woman for woman. And that's the last big change. There's some other things like when they got to Salt Lake City, they didn't have a temple, obviously. And they ended up building a hall that I got dedicated for temple work, but was not a temple. And so they did baptisms there. But for the most part, since then, it's been either temple or dedicated for temple use.
Right. I'm gonna interrupt you here real quick. So I just want to clarify, because I knew that it was not gender specific when it first came up, and I don't remember how I had learned that, but meaning that a man could perform the ordinance for a female. Hayden, you're yawning. Are you really that bored, kiddo?
A little bit.
A little bit? Yeah, Dad and I are boring. All righty. So
No, I don't like coffee. Coffee's gross. It's also
I
sinful.
didn't see you yawn. Okay. All right, our kids are bored. We're giving way too much historicity. Let's pay attention to our audience here with our yawning kiddos. So
Man, I thought I did that pretty quickly too. Apparently not quickly enough.
all righty. So gender specificity did not occur under Joseph Smith.
Correct.
But it got fixed, quote unquote fixed. Sorry, I can't get my other one up because I've got Henry who said hi in the screen. But so it got, quote unquote fixed by Brigham Young. But before that, a man could get baptized for and in behalf of, which is the lovely words they use in the temple, a female, and vice versa. And I think the reason that that's so significant is if you could do it for baptism, what other ordinances might you be able to cross the gender zone in when you're acting in behalf of somebody else? And so it becomes kind of in for those familiar with Mormonism, it ends up becoming a little bit of a conflict because that would be a significant doctrinal change. I mean, would we call that a doctrinal change? I think I would. Mason, what are your thoughts there?
My thoughts typically are that if it has to do with the way that an ordinance is administered, it's doctrinal.
Okay.
I don't know if everyone would agree with that, but let me give you an example, because we've talked about this a little bit, the changes in the temple. One of the things, the only thing that is a recent thing I wanted to bring up is that it used to be when they did baptisms for the dead, they would say, Sister Westbrook, having been commissioned of Jesus Christ, I baptize you for and in behalf of Lois Lane, who is dead.
Hayden, you're doing Superman's for him, okay?
Right.
Can't. She's female and Superman's male. So I'm doing Lois Lane. Hayden, you're doing Superman. Keep going, Mason.
So they used to say then Lois Lane, who is dead, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Well, recently they took the who is dead part out. So for me, if you're going to put, when Jesus reportedly came to the Nephites in the Book of Mormon, he said, you're not all doing the baptism together and in line. From now on, this is how you're going to do it. And he gave them the words to say. He told them how to do it. This is what's going to happen. So if the words were important enough for Jesus to tell them, it would seem like that is a doctrinal piece of the ordinance. In this case, for me, it feels like you've changed part of the ordinance. Maybe not a significant part, but I feel like it's part of the ordinance.
Okay. So Hayden, growing up Mormon, because, your dad and I birthed you into Mormonism, what was your understanding of baptisms for the dead? Like, what was the purpose? What was the reason? What were you taught that you remember?
It was just an opportunity for us to serve somebody who didn't have the opportunity to be baptized while they were on the earth. And of course, baptism is one of those requirements you need to have when you're trying to get to the highest level of heaven. So it was kind of just doing a service for people who didn't have the opportunity to follow Christ the way that Christ wanted you to follow him.
And what were your underlying feelings about that teaching? Like,
I definitely felt like it was I definitely feel like the overall basis of it, or what we were trying to do and accomplish, was a good thing. We were trying to help people who didn't have the opportunities we had, but I definitely felt like it was super cultish, because like I would tell my friends at school, be like, I just went and did baptisms for the dead, and they'd be like, what the heck is that? And I would tell them, and they're like, oh, that's kind of weird. And I'd be like, no, but it's service. And so I definitely enjoyed the feeling of doing something that felt good, but it was just really culty and kind of weird. And I really noticed that when I step away from it, from the church, and I haven't done it in a while. And I definitely think that if the Christ that we preach is Christ, or God that's a good person and everything, that he would love us and let us let us rest with him in heaven the way that without having to meet all of these requirements, like marriage in the temple and baptism. Because especially with marriage in the temple, you either have to marry a Mormon or your partner has to concede to get married under a church that she does not believe in. She does not believe in.
Right.
I go ahead, hon. I'll say a comment afterwards.
Awesome. I really appreciate that insight, Hayden. I think that it's important for our audience to know that our children, while yes, they were raised in the church, they were never raised in like a Utah or highly populated Mormon environment because Mason was in the military. And so we were always in the mission field. So, Hayden, I think that if you had grown up like in Snowflake, the way that I did, and you had gone to school to talk about your experiences of baptisms for the dead, you would have gotten a lot of support from your peers. It wouldn't have been so weird because it's definitely a cultural phenomenon in the sense of I don't know of any other religion other than the Mormon Church or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that teaches baptisms or ordinances for those who preceded us in death. Having said that, I remember growing up loving that doctrine because it was gross to me to think that God would have somebody, for us, it was always, oh, the poor people in Africa. I'm not exactly certain why we, put that level of oppression on Africa when we're giving our examples, but the people that never had the opportunity to know Jesus could still get into heaven, whereas so many of the other religions that I'd had an opportunity to participate in, it was kind of like, this life is it. And if you didn't in this life, you're just fucked. And the religions that I had participated in was Catholic with my great aunt and uncle, limited exposure, very limited exposure. We're talking about, I went to a Catholic church less than 5 or 6 times. And then Baptist church, I definitely attended some Baptist congregations and teachings with one of my close friends. And then Mason, you and I actually recently had a conversation with a family member where they reiterated that this life is the only opportunity you get. And if you were just born in a place or your parenthood or your lineage wouldn't have allowed it, well, you were just fucked and SOL. And so I think one of the benefits of the teaching in Mormonism is that, and one of the things that I loved about it was that everybody would get a fair shot at making it all the way to that, again, highest degree of heaven. I don't think it wasn't required to go to the lower degrees, was it? Is baptism only required for the celestial kingdom?
Yeah, just the celestial kingdom.
Okay.
So because the other kingdoms don't matter. Like they're kind of there to sound pretty, but they don't matter.
They're almost like a soft version of hell. Like or what I would say what Catholics call purgatory. Like you're not with God, but you're also not with Satan, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think when Mormonism describes them, they try and describe them as if they're heaven-ish. Like somebody reported that Joseph Smith said that if you could see the terrestrial kingdom, you would kill yourself to get there. I don't know if he actually said that. Somebody reported that being the case. And so Mormonism tries to play them off as they're this beautiful place. It's great for you to be there. But in reality, and the way they teach and the way they behave, they're essentially a hell because you will not be getting what you're supposed to want.
Right. You won't be with God. You'll be in a heavenly place, but not with God or Jesus. Right. Okay. So real quick, Mason, before you share your comment, I just want to say, hey, for those of you who are viewing, just a reminder, we cannot see your comments unless you are on, I believe it's the Daisy Girl Communications page or the Unpacking with Sarah YouTube channel. We're not exactly certain why. It just doesn't work for us. So if you'd like to have your comment seen, please head over there. Also, somebody's beeping over here. The other thing is that if you are enjoying what you see, please like and share or subscribe. That really helps us to beat those algorithms so that our program is visible to lots of people. So, all right, Nathan, go ahead.
Well, one of the things that it kind of brought up with the 3 degrees of glory, the thing that really struck me about what Hayden is talking about is that and I don't know if I'll describe this exactly right with the words, but I'll explain what I mean. But the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints tries to be inclusively exclusive. What I mean by that is they try and make it sound like everyone is invited. Everyone can participate in these things. Everyone has an equal shot. But the reality is that's not the case. And so the doctrine of baptism for the dead is to sound just like what you described, Sarah, that everyone gets a fair shake. Everyone will get the chance to do what they want. And as I'll describe with a couple of the things that I have ready for Alex to pull up, that just doesn't really shake out to be the case. So they want to sound like they're completely inclusive. It's kind of like the thing on, if you look at a Mormon church, anywhere in the world, it'll say the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and right underneath it'll say visitors welcome. Well, I'd like to know which church out there doesn't allow visitors. It's not generally the case. And so just, it's this thing of, I want to look like I'm being inclusive, but I'm really not.
Right. So I'm going to ask you, Katie. Oh, do you see this death look she's giving me?
I'm not meaning to. It just
Katie is a little bit nervous, right?
a little bit, yeah, sure.
All right. So would you be willing to share kind of like as you were growing up in the Mormon church, what were some of your thoughts and what were you taught about baptisms for the dead?
I was taught,
and if you can look right here so everybody feels like you're looking and talking to them, gorgeous. She's gorgeous. Okay, go.
Sorry, I had this totally thought out and then you asked me the question. I
forgot. She had a script.
I've never had that happen before. Sarcasm?
I was taught that gosh, thank you for asking the question, Mom.
I'm sorry. I will never ask you another question for as long as we both shall record. Keep going. Sorry, I just kicked the screen, so it felt like an earthquake.
You did. It was like a...
Yeah, it was earthquake. Go.
I was taught that if you didn't do it, that like if you weren't baptized, you weren't gonna like get all the way up there. But like, I totally had this planned out, Mom.
Do you want to take some notes and we can come back to it in a minute?
No, it's fine. It was like they made you do it like for the people who like weren't able to do it or didn't have the ability or who even who didn't want to get baptized, because otherwise they were going to get punished. And especially for the people who didn't have the opportunity, I don't feel like God would have actually punished them for not having the opportunity to get baptized. I feel like that's kind of
almost like it was your responsibility to make sure other people got salvation.
Yeah.
That's astute. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's huge.
If somebody who didn't get into the church until they were 20 or died before they were 8 and they weren't able to get baptized, God's not gonna punish them for not being able to do that. So
right, it's almost like you're saying, so number one, the church believes that if you die prior to your 8th birthday, you don't need the baptism. You get the automatic golden ticket straight to heaven. You're good to go. But it's almost like God is punishing people for putting them in the situation. Like if you believe that God micromanages what's going on in earth and that you were sent to a certain family or, world region or cultural whatever, that if you didn't figure your own way out of that and you didn't accomplish these tasks that aren't really posted for everybody to find out, that God was going to punish them unless you took care of it.
Or maybe you're in a family and you're not an adult, so you haven't left yet, but you believe in Mormonism and they don't. You're not able to go get baptized because of them. God's not gonna make it your fault that you didn't go get baptized.
Right. You're talking about a just being. But I feel like the Mormon God is pretty damn schizophrenic. Right. I mean, in my family, we're all gonna laugh. Hayden, why are you laughing so hard at that? What are your experiences, Hayden, with schizophrenia?
Oh, they're vast.
It's a good word. That's a 4-letter word.
That's
we
a
don't use
four-letter
four-letter
word,
words here.
and it's a good
Yeah,
four-letter
it's
word.
Katie. What's your experience with schizophrenia?
It's very much I don't know what's the word. Like sometimes it's gonna be good, sometimes it's gonna be bad. You never really know.
Very
And
bipolar.
it's you're hallucinating half the time.
It's-
Like it's not
Yep.
real.
It's
We're
unpredictable.
very
It's
unpredictable. And so obviously, just a reminder to our audience, Hayden and Katie's older brother, our Mason's and my second son, has a diagnosis of schizophrenia. So when we joke about schizophrenia, we are joking about it from a very experienced perception. And I agree with you, Mason. It's totally unpredictable. And the reaction to whatever the irritating stimuli is usually doesn't fit the situation. It can either be a huge reaction or like no reaction at all, and you never really know what you're going to get, what version of the schizophrenia you're going to get. So when we talk about a schizophrenic God, it's kind of the God of the Old Testament for sure, where things just they never really lined up logically.
Yeah, I have a quick blurb I think that helps to kind of explain that, but I wanted to hear Hayden's comment first.
I just think that it's preached that God and we'll know our experiences and our life and all the things that we're going to do and all the things we're going to do wrong and all the things we're going to do right. But for things like baptism, it's not wrong. I don't think it's wrong to not get baptized. It's just not something that you were ever in the right circumstances to achieve. So when everyone needs to be baptized and it feels like we're getting punished if we're not getting baptized and you're getting withheld from the celestial kingdom, but you knew that I was never going to get baptized, you're putting me in an unrealistic situation. And it kind of makes me think about the SMART goals that they teach in like school and stuff. It's just not achievable. So if my goal was to reach the celestial kingdom, but I never had the opportunity to get baptized, it's just not a goal that I can get to, especially if I didn't know that. Like a lot of people with Mormonism, it's not a very known religion. So a lot of people don't even know the doctrines, the principles, all of those things. So when you put them in a situation where they can't get baptized and then they're not going to achieve the best that they can achieve, it's just, I mean, it feels like you're getting set up for failure rather than given the opportunity to succeed. And I just think that that's
It's Dad's cell phone. Mace, I think your cell phone is.
It's not my phone, it's my computer. And because I have the volume on my computer so I can hear you, all the notifications come through. I can't silence them, and I don't know how. There's probably a way.
Well, why are you getting text messages on your computer?
Because
the
it's hooked up
computer is
together.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to stop the sound or anything. So
You have to put it on like do not disturb in your notification box.
yeah.
So up in the
Anyway.
top, you've got your do not disturb notification.
hide the text messages.
Hide
actually.
alerts. There we go.
No, hide alerts will hide the text messages. So like when you're getting texted, it won't pop up. Right here.
Yeah, that's what I want. I don't
Yeah.
want them to come up here on the computer. So okay.
Alrighty. So we figured out the ding ding.
Yeah. So my thought was, you talk about a schizophrenic, a schizophrenic God. Really, religion, and I wrote this down, so I just want to read what I wrote here. Religion isn't about blessings; it's about escaping punishment.
Mm.
And I
Ooh.
think
Whew, that's heavy. Say it again.
religion isn't about blessings. Goodness gracious. Religion isn't about getting blessings, it's about escaping punishment. You can make it sound like this is a huge blessing. We're doing baptisms for everyone so they can all get these blessings of the celestial kingdom. But really, we're so enamored with it and so urgent about it because we don't want anyone to be cursed for not having been baptized. And really that's where the urgency comes from. It doesn't come from, because if it's a just God, he'll make things sort out. But if
Right.
it's an unjust God, then he won't, and now it's all dependent upon us.
Right. And I think that that's, because, a lot of Mormon people would say, but that's the beauty of it. Because we have the temple, we're able to correct all of the situations for the people who didn't have the opportunity while on the earth. This is a beautiful thing. But then, as Katie said, that means that somebody else's salvation is dependent on my choices, and my actions. And then, when you start doing the mathematical equations, so every humanoid or human Homo sapien person that's
Right.
ever lived upon the earth in the entire, Earth's existence. And now we have, just these Mormons that made all the right choices in earth that are physically alive. What's going to happen with this? And we've got 1,000 years or something like that to get all this work done after the second coming of Christ. Like, we will be doing nothing but getting dunked in the temple to make sure that everybody has a choice. And so what that ends up meaning is that, when you start looking at these numbers and the years through, a human eye, it becomes an impossible feat to accomplish. It just doesn't add up. And then we have a very inefficient God, because God is like, look, I cannot have you in heaven with me unless you completed this symbolic ritual. He's very inefficient, and that doesn't make sense for at least not the God of the, the
It's like being born into royalty. You can't achieve the best that you can achieve unless you were given opportunity. It's called like the caste, you're born with opportunities. You're born into royalty, born with riches. You're born with opportunities to achieve what God wants from you.
Right. And here we call that privilege.
Privilege.
It's like the church is gaslighting you.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, I think I'm using the right word, but like,
well, I'll tell you if you're not, because
if someone's salvation is dependent on you and the choices you make, and that's what the church teaches you, it's like they're gonna make you feel bad because if they didn't do it, and so now their salvation is dependent on you. If you don't want to do that, then they don't get their salvation, and they're like forever not, yeah. So you're going to feel bad because the church makes you feel bad for not wanting that.
Yeah.
That's not right.
So yeah, it's a form of gaslighting. Gaslighting is where you are working in a way to push your reality onto somebody else as their reality, or you are messing with somebody else's sense of reality in order to have them question their own reality.
I think this is more like guilt tripping.
I was going to say that.
Yeah.
It's like guilt tripping the person into thinking that you see it a lot in high school. I see gaslighting a lot as making it somebody else's fault, that something went wrong, even though in reality it's probably your fault or somebody else's fault.
Right. So gaslighting is usually the term we use to describe someone who is intentionally or unintentionally working to shift somebody else's reality in an unethical way for their own gain, usually.
So like when my best friend at the time wouldn't talk to me for 3 weeks because I bleached my hair.
No, that's mean girl stuff. More like if I turn that light off and then back on, and you're like, whoa, why did the light flicker? And I say, it didn't flicker, you're seeing things. Like that.
Okay.
So I have two comments to what we were talking about here. The first is kind of going back to this inclusively exclusive. When things don't make sense. So you talked about, Sarah, the timeline, this rush when we also believe that in the millennium we'll just be doing work for the dead. this rush exists, but it doesn't make sense. So then I have to step back, and what I've tried to make a habit of now is, well, then what's really going on? Who is this benefiting? The church is telling us that we're benefiting the dead, but in reality, what they're trying to do is inculcate the living, or to acclimate or cause assimilation of the living. The reason that you have the youth, I mean, as young as 11 years old now, going to the temple to do these things is because you want them to become assimilated into the service, into the church, and you want them to believe that this is their responsibility.
I felt like when the temple felt like a necessary thing, and if I didn't do it, I would definitely get looked at differently from my peers, and the community was really the best part of the church for, I think, everyone that's talked about it, is the community is usually the best, or like the morals. The morals are really good in the church, and then the community is usually really good in the church. So when I didn't meet up, like if I had like a test that day, I can't go to the temple today to do baptisms. I was definitely going to get looked at different. I was definitely going to get teased.
Yeah.
And being so young, when you start doing it like 11 or 12, it's like teaching a younger dog tricks. It's going to stick with them. So it felt, rather than like a responsibility, it felt like if I didn't do it, I'm going to get judged. I'm going to get treated differently. And it felt the same way with like a talk. Like if I didn't talk or I didn't teach in class, just because that's not who I am. It's not like, I'm not very good at talking in front of a bunch of people at like a pulpit. I'm better on stage and stuff. If I didn't do that, I was going to get looked at differently. And if my talk wasn't really good, then I mean, I didn't meet that expectation. I'm probably not going to get called up to do talks anymore.
I
Yeah.
love, Katie, that you have brought up kind of like the developmental. Here, Katie, can you hold Henry for a minute? He's wiggling a lot. I love that you brought up the developmental age for when people are starting this ordinance, because you're talking about kiddos that are like 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. So right now, if you are going to be 12 in that calendar year, you would be able to go to the temple. That's one of the changes. So we've got kiddos as young as 11, but in their 12th year of life, that are going to the temple. And when we're talking about like those preteens and teens, the opinions and motivators of their peers mean more to them than the opinions and motivators of parents. That's just a normal developmental phase. The other thing is that we're really trying to figure out the identity of self, and this age group is very self-conscious. And again, that's a very typical thing. There's a lot of fear of, am I liked enough? What are people saying about me or thinking about me? And this is like the mean girl, stupid boy, middle school years that you're starting this, all the way up until your adulthood. And so I love, Hayden, that you bring up, it's not necessarily that the church is going to teach. If you don't go to the temple, you are letting down the people that you would be baptizing, that you would be performing the baptisms for. It's more along the lines of, well, all my friends are going, and if I don't go, I'm going to miss out on this peer group community that is so important. Because the other thing you have to look at within the Mormon church is that when it comes to time commitments, if you remember from our cult series that we did, the time commitment for Mormonism is very, very high. That's why we call it a high demand religion. Right. So you guys would have been attending church, once you hit the youth, you've got Saturday stake youth activities, you've got Wednesday night activities, you have Sunday worship service, you have Monday night family home evening. So if you're coming from a really, strong LDS family that's doing their best to meet all of those requirements, Sunday you're not doing anything because that day is dedicated to the Lord. Monday night you're doing family home evening. Tuesday night you have off mostly. Wednesday night is youth night. Thursday night you get off. Friday night is normally for school activities. Saturday is again church stuff.
It's
Temple
shorter
trips.
day, yeah.
It's just insane. And so what we noticed for our teens is that while we were attending and they were in that age group, they would start attending the temple. So for us, Mason was around 12. I don't think any of you guys went when you were still 11. You may
No,
have.
I was 12.
You guys
But
were
it's also a similar concept with baptism is the age group is really low. Like it was just
Right,
like
you
I
don't
want to
have
get
to start
baptized
doing
because
it.
it's cool. I would rather do that now when I'm like 18 or 17, 18 because I'm more aware of myself.
Right. You want it to be a choice for yourself, and
Yeah.
it wasn't at
And
8 years
it
old.
was like I'm expected to do it, and if I don't do it, like I can't even imagine what I would have been going through if I'd have said no, I'm not ready to get baptized when I turn 8, like right away.
Right.
So,
Absolutely. Well, and I love that. So the end of my comment was by the time our kids hit like 16 and they were busy in varsity sports, at that point, temple attendance would have fizzled out. So just a really quick reminder, if you are joining us today, we would love for you to click the subscribe button on your screen or share the live stream with your friends. We're trying really hard to build our audience. We are going to be giving a challenge to help us build our audience on YouTube and other social media events. Hayden actually has decided to join our team and try and hit that algorithm soft spot so that way we are more visible. So super easy. You can click share, click subscribe. If you like what you're seeing, please reach out. Also, again, if you want to give us some tips to improve the show, you can do so at daisygirlcommunications@gmail.com. And if you want to give us tips to help us continue to bring you quality content, you can do so by scanning our Venmo link. And that helps us pay our staff a industry standard and livable income. Jennifer, welcome so much. Jennifer says, sorry, I missed this and I will watch later. Thank you so much, Jennifer. We absolutely love that. Once again, a reminder. So Jennifer is coming to us on YouTube. So we can see your comments on the Unpacking with Sarah YouTube channel. Sarah is spelled Sarah. But we are not seeing the comments from my personal Facebook page. So we need to really figure this out. I know it's a StreamYard link thing. So if you want to have your comments visible to us during the live show, the best way to do that would be to join us on the YouTube channel Unpacking with Sarah. And that is where we can see your comments and interact with you live. And Jennifer, we will catch you when you are available. Also, if you would like for us to not put your comment on the screen, please mention that in the comment thread. Say, don't make this public or don't make this visible, and then make your comment. I can read your comment or respond to your comment, but we will not put it on the screen because we definitely want to make sure we are protecting your privacy if that is what you would like for us to do. All right, Mason, go ahead.
Well, I just have a quick story that kind of demonstrates a little bit of what we're talking about here. The idea of being kind of guilted into, you start with kind of this miracle story, like baptisms for the dead, kind of consider this miracle thing that God has given us. Now we can get everybody the chance. When I was on my mission, I don't know how common this story was, but I've heard it more than once. And I've told it more than once. So there's this story, and it's a long story, so I'm gonna synopsize this in about a minute. That does sound a little creepy, Tanya.
Yeah, Tanya, let us know what is it that we said that sounds creepy? Like, give us an example. Keep going.
I don't know.
no, I
I
think
think
she's saying that I found you sounds creepy.
Yeah.
Oh.
She says, I found you, and that sounds creepy. I agree. So
It is a little bit.
there's this story about this missionary that is knocking doors, and he knocks on the door of, I forget the woman's name, we'll say Blue.
Lois Lane.
Yeah. Lois Lane. They knock on Lois's door, right?
Lois
And
Lane.
she invites them in.
Lois today.
She invites them in. They teach her. She's excited. They give her a Book of Mormon. They come back a couple of days later and ask her if she had read what they told her. And she said, yeah, I read that. And they start asking about like sections of the Book of Mormon, or they ask her, what did you like about it? And she starts talking about areas they hadn't assigned. Well, it comes out that she had read the whole Book of Mormon in whatever time period this was, a few days, a week or whatever. And long story short, she ends up getting baptized. She loves it all. She gets baptized. And then later, after getting baptized, she finds out about a patriarchal blessing. So she gets a patriarchal blessing, and that gets mailed to her. This is back in when you didn't get it until it was mailed to you. And so she calls the elders and said, I got the blessing. Come, I want you to read it with me. And so they come, and she asks one of the elders to read it. And he says, no, this is really kind of a personal thing. You should read it yourself. And she says, no, I want you to read it. And after a couple of times of that, she says, you don't get it. I haven't been able to read anything for 10 years. When you handed me the Book of Mormon,
blind or something.
She wasn't blind. She just lost her ability to read because she couldn't see things. And she said, when you handed me the Book of Mormon, I could read it. So I sat down and I read it all. I didn't put it down until I'd finished it. And so they read this story, and in her patriarchal blessing, it says something along the lines of, if the missionary who was supposed to convert you had gone on a mission, you would have been converted 60 years ago. You were always ready for this, basically. And a lot of that guilt of somebody else screwed you over. And then at the end of the story, it talks about this missionary, the one that did get to her and did convert her, because she dies shortly thereafter. It talks about how he had extended his mission, and he was in the last month of that extension.
Of course, because it can't be just a simple.
It can't just be a miracle story.
Right. We got to have all the pieces have to be miraculous in order for it to be enough.
Well, and it has to have a healthy dose of almost hidden shame. There's this, you can't just be, it can't just be this missionary that had a great experience with this woman. It's that the missionary that should have been there to convert her wasn't. It's that this missionary didn't even get the chance either until he was on the last month of his mission. It's all this intensity of like, look, if you're not on your game all the time, you're not going to be able to help somebody. Well, and so there's that shame of like Katie said, you know, if I don't go to the temple, these 12 people are not going to get baptized for, and it's on me. Right. And it's just not. But that is the message that, I mean, Katie brought it up. That is the message that kids are getting.
Okay. So Tanya, I see that you said that your stuff was buffering. I checked with our producer, and he says our signal is clear, so it might be your signal. But please, yes, if you're any of our audience, if you're ever seeing any issues with the signal or the buffering, let us know, and we will do everything we can to correct it. You know, Mason, it's really funny that you tell that story, mostly because I remember that, you know, it's supposed to be this faith promoting, miraculous, amazing story that she was found in order to shame those that don't end up serving their mission or don't end up wanting to participate in the temple. Yeah. It's going to be your fault that somebody's salvation is withheld. And the church even goes as far as saying, you know, the sins of that individual are going to be placed on the missionary that did not show up. A personal experience, because, you know, the issue is, where's the source material for this story? Who actually, right. Like I've heard the story, but it's almost like that. It's legend. It's like a Mormon legend. It's not necessarily documented anywhere, but the legend has so much weight to it that I remember when my brother, who is 2 years younger than me, got his mission call. He had some things in his life. Number one, I don't think he ever really wanted to go. I think he did the mission call because of the social pressure to go. And then when it came out that he didn't want to go, or that he wasn't, quote unquote, worthy to go or whatever, his bishop did, to my parents and to him, say that because he was not going to go, that the people he would have converted would no longer get that opportunity, and that their sins would now be on my brother's head. And yeah, Jennifer, there are so many Mormon legends out there. Like, how do you keep up with them? And if you're watching General Conference, you know, we've heard some of these Mormon myth legends out of the mouths of prophets that later they're having to take them back because they were super embellished or, whatever.
Olive Gunn, Jeffrey
Right,
R.
yeah.
Mormon,
Yeah.
all this stuff.
Russell M. Nelson, all of them, they've had to retract stories because the people involved in them were like, that is not how that went down. That's an embellishment.
Right.
And so anyway, that's one of those things is you've got to be careful with these legends. And then how are the youth interpreting those legends? Because like Katie said, did you like feeling like you were responsible for somebody else's ability to get into heaven or not get into heaven?
No,
Because
don't know.
she's like, I'm going to focus on the dog.
I'm gonna
Go
go off of Katie is I did not like the responsibility because and when I think of it right now, because it's coming up into my head right now as I'm bullshitting my way through this.
Hey, he's a Westbrook. Keep going, dude. You're fine.
Okay.
I can't sit so close to you anymore.
I know. And I'm sorry about that. But
You don't seem sorry.
I'm not. As the responsibility of other people being put on me because God put them in a situation where they could not get baptized, and now it's on me that they're not going to get baptized. Is that gaslighting? It's my fault they didn't get baptized, not God's, even though God is the person who put them in the situation where they couldn't get baptized. So that social pressure of I was not able to go to the temple today to go do baptisms for the dead. So now those 12 people aren't going to be baptized and they can't reach the celestial kingdom. That's not my fault, but it sure as hell felt like it.
Yeah.
Because I was the one who couldn't go. God was perfect, so it couldn't be God's fault.
Yeah.
And when I'm thinking of it now, I really hate that.
Yeah, for sure.
We've talked.
Real quick, what's really funny, Hayden, is that the way that those names work in the temple is that the 12 that you would have done, they'll get done by the next youth in line. So the reality is, all those names that they have that you guys are running through, they're on a big list and they will all eventually get done according to Mormon doctrine. So why are we placing all of this pressure on our kids that they have to be done right now in this way immediately? Go ahead, Mason.
Yeah. Well, there's a comment here from Michael. I don't know if we can put it up there, but if not, yeah. So just a wild hunch, but I think the Almighty is capable of making contingency plans. He strikes me as a plan B type of guy, just saying.
Yeah. Because I mean, if you can't get baptized and your expectation is that everybody gets baptized, it's like, oh shit, I forgot about that. Now I have to go back and we're going to do this baptism for the dead. That's not my fault. That's just another way for me to give everybody else a chance to serve the people who I put in a bad situation.
Right.
I kind of get that with the sacrament too. It's like, oh, you messed up, but that's okay. As long as you come to church and take the sacrament, it all is forgiven.
Yeah. As long as you keep us in charge, right? I need the church forever. In one of the previous episodes that we talked about, I don't even know if it's been released yet, but one that we did, the idea that the church does not set itself up for us not needing it anymore. Like a good teacher, like parents, even, parents, we teach our children because we expect that at some point in time, they won't need us anymore. We want it to be that way. The church doesn't do that. The church wants us to need them all the time, forever and ever. Amen. Right. And so it's just that issue. And then the second thing I was going to talk about is on so many of these episodes, we've talked about what the implied message is. There's messages that you're sending that are obvious. And then there's messages that you're sending that are not obvious. And one of the examples is...
Hang on, Mason.
Yeah, go ahead.
When we talk about implied messages, we actually reminded me, we had a listener once say, what do you mean by implied messages? And so I'm going to answer, maybe we should change that wording to an overt message, one that is actually stated, or a covert message, which is the implied message, or I haven't just spelled it out in black and white for you, but the cultural connotations are, if you don't think of it this way or believe in it this way, then you're wrong. But then you get a whole lot of mixed opinions because it isn't spelled out in black and white. And
Yeah.
so overt, covert, implied, or what's the other word? Like, what's the opposite of implied? Applied.
I don't remember what word we used.
Yes,
Implicit,
right.
I think, is what implicit or implied, I think, is what I
Yeah,
used
implicit
initially.
or implied. Correct. That's what we
Yeah.
had. So
So
overt, covert, just the idea of the message that wasn't spelled out in black and white for
but
all
still
to
received.
understand with clarity, but still culturally significant within the LDS or Mormon congregation and
Yeah.
culture. Go ahead, Mace.
Yeah. So this example actually comes from LDS.org, and it is one of the ones that I have for you, Alex. I think this is the belief one. But let me just tell this story real quick. I forget how long ago, recently within the last 10 to 40 years, I don't remember exactly, but there was this big stink by the Jewish community because they found out that church members were getting baptized for Holocaust survivors and not survivors, people who had been killed in the Holocaust.
Right.
And the Jewish community was like, we're not okay with this. You're baptizing people that they're our people. Why are you doing this? And so the church backtracked and they, made the kind of politically correct statements that they needed to make. We're sorry. But then the message, really what was being received is the Jewish community feels like we're baptizing them into our church. So on LDS.org, they say right here, so the highlighted part says, I don't want to read all of it, but the highlighted part says, Latter-day Saints believe that baptisms for the dead do not make deceased persons members of the church. So they put this out here. However, let me tell you exactly what happens when you get baptized. You get baptized, which I've already said the words for that one, and then you get the gift of the Holy Ghost. Well, what do they do in the gift of the Holy Ghost? They say, by the power of the Melchizedek priesthood, I confirm you. Do you remember?
Nope. It
A
really
member
wasn't that important.
Of the Church of
I
Jesus
confirm
Christ.
you a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and say unto you, receive the Holy Ghost.
At this
That
point, I was thinking,
exact
go for it. Sorry.
that exact ordinance happens in the temple for the dead. So you can say that you're not baptizing them into the church. You can say that they don't go on the records of the church. Okay, fine. But technically they are on the records of the church. We're just not counting them. They're on the records of the church because you've kept implicit and explicit records of everyone that you've baptized. So they're sending this message trying to be politically correct, like, oh no, we're not making them members of the church. But in reality, the wording of the ordinance says something different. And so that's kind of that implied, so covert versus overt message. The overt message is, no, they're not members of the church, but the covert message is, absolutely, they're members of the church. And
Right.
they'll explain it as, they're not getting forced to accept it. Fine. But it doesn't feel that way.
Right. So, and I love what Michael says here. Instead of equipping people with spiritual tools to go out into the world and live well, the church makes itself indispensable at every turn. Like,
Yes.
we can teach you all of these things, but you still need us to live well. And without us, you won't. The other comment that I wanted to address was Jennifer's comment that they have been out of the church for a while. She didn't know that any of them had retracted a story. And I would say the best place to find out about retracted stories, I believe, is the Mormonism Live episode that's like liars, and something else. And so we can absolutely link that in there. But I would look that up. It's with Bill Reel and RFM. They talk about how those got retracted. It's not like the church will come out and say, hey, we embellished this story. Oh, my snuggly girl. We embellished this story, therefore we're going to fix it. It was more, they just altered it on the sidelines. One of the stories, the person in the hat, something that Nelson did, ended up having to be removed from his autobiography because the lady in the hat threw a fit, I believe is the story. I could get my details wrong, but there it is. So
they excommunicated Paul H. Dunn when they found out that he was
he was
telling stories
embellishing.
that weren't true,
Right.
or at least not, like, it wasn't even that they were necessarily not true stories, but that they were true stories for somebody else that he was telling as if they were his stories. So
Stories,
that
right.
was a big deal enough for them there, but they still, they're not going to excommunicate Jeffrey R. Holland.
Why can't they excommunicate Nelson? Because I mean, he's had a couple of doozies in conference recently. I mean, are
Right.
you allowed to ex the prophet? I don't know. I don't know if we have a doctrine.
Oh, it can be done.
Yet.
It can be done, but all of the 12 apostles would have to be on board, and they would have to do it.
Ooh, that would be that. You know what? That's going to be my new fantasy. Just to like play that out in my mind when I have nothing productive to think about. I'm going to be like, ooh, could they all do it? Would they all do it?
Yeah, you just hang on to that one. That's not
All
going
right,
to
so
ever happen.
Yeah, one
just
day
Because
I'm gonna
God's in
shoot the
charge.
clock.
God's in charge. If he doesn't want Nelson to be prophet anymore, then Nelson will
he'll
die.
just die.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's going to be a while still, I think, because that is one healthy 99-year-old dude. Alrighty. So having said that, just want to remind our listeners, if you are joining us today, please like and subscribe and share. It's really easy. It's just a click of a button, and that would really help us out. So isn't my daughter just gorgeous? She's gorgeous. Love you. So I really want to kind of shift gears now and talk about our personal experiences in the temple. And since everybody in the Westbrook family knows that mom has absolutely no issues sharing things that are difficult or embarrassing or of a sexual nature, that I will go ahead and go first. But I just want to do a shout out.
Wait. When did this start happening?
Content warning. Hang on, Mason. You can tease me in a minute. Content warning. We are going to be talking about some sexualized things. Oh, this is a great. Let's answer this question. A little off topic, but how do you get the missionaries to stop calling you after you've left the church?
Scare them.
You can do that. Cussing does help them stay away. You can tell them to fuck off, but then when the new missionaries
gay.
tell them you're ooh, another good one. Now you're gay. If you would like to do it honestly and with less drama involved, you actually would need to remove your name from their records.
Yep.
With a letter of do not contact again. I believe that my letter said if you contact me about church, anything, then I will press charges. Like, it was, I will come after you for harassment. So some people have had to do that. Most people don't have to do that. The way that it ended up working for me was I told the bishop, hey, I'm okay if you talk to me about things that are going on with my kids. Because for a long time, we were a mixed faith family. And I think, Mason, you and the kids' records are still in the church. I don't think you guys have removed your records and whatnot. But I told the bishop that if he had anything, that it needed to go through Mason, and I trusted Mason to talk to me. Not everybody's in that situation, though. But honestly, the only way to get the missionaries to leave you alone is for you to have a do not contact on your record. But the best way is completely remove your records from the church. Now, that is... it's not a real thing, Christy. Like, I want you to know that, like, if I went back to the church right now and said, hey, I want to come back, I could get rebaptized with bishop's permission. And after all these podcasts and my books and stuff, I'd probably have to get the first presidency's permission, because my heathenness is worse than most people's heathenness, because I talk about it. But I would have to get that permission. But as soon as I got rebaptized, all of my records and ordinances would be automatically restored, which really just means that they put some sort of a notation in my record, and it will no longer show up on LDS tools, or when, your bishop looks it up. It's no longer in the local organization, but it definitely is still most likely held onto somewhere in Salt Lake's archives and whatnot. But the best way to get no contact is to remove your name from the records of the church, or get really, really dramatic in the no contact. I have heard of one person that very much enjoyed ordering multiple copies of the CES letter book. And when the missionaries came by, they would hand it out free to them. And that stopped all contact, because we don't want our poor missionaries to be introduced to such hateful anti-Mormon literature.
What book?
The CES letter. It's like a big letter that outlines the historical
You
issues.
can read it later if you want it. Yeah.
Plug in for Jeremy Reynolds.
Right.
It's a
There
good
are
document.
Maybe
there
I
are
just
a couple of details. There's a couple of details of that process that are a little bit off, but that's the basic idea. And then you just have to remember too that once you get your name off the records, that doesn't mean the missionaries won't come. It just means they won't have your contact information. So
Right. Right.
So
Because
yeah, the only way, if it's been years, Christy, if it's been years, the only way to stop them from trying to contact you is to have your name removed from the records
hang up
or
a
to
whole
get
bunch
excommunicated.
Get excommunicated. It's a lot more fun.
yeah, Katie just says hang up some pride flags and whatnot, and you're good. They won't come near you because you have pride flags up. So I mean that might be a great way to do it.
I'll put a beware of dog sign in your front lawn.
Oh, when I was a bishop, I had one guy pull a gun on me. When I was bishop, I had one guy pull a gun on me. But I was there to confirm that he wanted his name removed from the records. So he confirmed it. His name was removed from the records. But yeah, that's the only way to make sure that they won't keep contacting you, because you'll stay on the records until you take your name off.
Right. And as part of taking your name off, you need to say, do not contact me again.
Also, they'll contact your family too. So if you have family members that are members of the church, they'll contact them, because if you've moved, they'll be like, hey, we can't get in touch with Christy. Do you know where they are? And some family members will tell them where you are. And so then your records get transferred to the right ward. A new bishop, a new set of missionaries, like, oh, this new name here. Cool. Let me go check on them. Like maybe they want to see us. And for some people, maybe they do. But for most people, I imagine that they do not.
Right. Michael says answer the door with a cigarette in your mouth and a cup of coffee in hand. I think he's had some experience.
Yeah,
do it with
that would
black
work
alcohol
for Christy.
instead.
Katie says do it with wine. I mean, you guys, we could like
Nope, that won't work. That won't work. That will just give them a challenge,
Answer-
Christy.
Because then they'll just send
Christy,
you dead.
The only way you can do it is to answer the door butt ass naked. They won't come back.
that is what I was just gonna say, Mason. I was like, you guys are all funny. All those
That is
things
one
can
way to handle
be
it.
all those things can be what's the word I'm looking for? Forgiven. But if you're answering the door butt ass naked, or if you're female, just topless would probably do, as long as they're male elders. But yeah, if you go naked, they probably won't come back.
Do it in lingerie.
That I mean, we like I said, the Westbrooks are showing their real colors. So back on topic. Thank you for that.
Finally, answer the door and say, finally, a threesome.
I would just like I would like to just say that Christy has demonstrated that she is a squirrel sister. Just like you had a squirrel moment there. There's my squirrel. I love it. I think his name is Nutty. That is Nutty the squirrel. All righty. So
Yeah, maybe we should get back on track.
yeah,
How
we'll get
about
back on
women
track.
Tell us your personal story, Sarah.
All right, Katie, you are so my child. All right, ADHD squirrel. So content warning, we are going to talk a little bit about the discomfort, especially for females performing baptisms for the dead that occur in the temple. So, if you followed me for a while, you know that when I was a teenager, I had a lot of issues with my menstruation. Stuff mostly with it would start and then it wouldn't stop, and I would bleed constantly. And so performing baptisms for the dead for me was very difficult and uncomfortable because I mean, just getting from Snowflake, Arizona down to the Mesa Temple was about a 3.5 hour drive, and chances were pretty high that I was going to already have bled out before we got there. And so doing baptisms while I was menstruating was problematic. And what it led to was me having to tell multiple leaders, I'm bleeding, I don't want to do this. Or the fear of bleeding through while I was wearing all white.
Yes, make the water red.
A murder happened in the font. Oh my goodness. Yes. See, now we got my daughter's attention. Y'all see how this Westbrook connections.
Heathens, both of you.
Yeah, we are heathens. We are both going to hell, and we will have a party there.
Just bring a paintbrush, pin it all over the white wall.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So, gross. After that, the thing that was really challenging for me is, so I didn't do baptisms the first couple of times I went to do baptisms. I only did the confirmations, but I got pestered by the priesthood leaders in the temple. So like my young women's leader knew why I wasn't getting in the font, but that didn't mean the young men's leaders knew, or that the bishop knew, or that the people officiating the ordinance in the temple knew. And so it was like, oh, are you going to do baptisms? No, I'm not really comfortable. Oh, well, what's going on? I'm bleeding all over the place, asshat. But it's really difficult to say that calmly for a Westbrook. I was the Lee girl then, so that's where that comes from. Just so y'all know, that's from the Lee genes. And you can, so I've got it looks like me responding to myself. You can request it from the bishop or do it without the church at all email. Oh, hey, yeah, that's true. You can request it from the bishop. Hey, that is me. That's somebody on my media team responding to me.
You're
Yes,
welcome.
for getting your names off, if you need help, shoot me an email and I can let you know. So I remember the first time I was able to actually do the baptisms for the dead, because miraculously we were there on a week that I wasn't bleeding all over the place. And I remember I grew up in a home that was ultra, quote unquote, Mormon modest, meaning nobody is allowed to see your underwear. Nobody, like, it was a big fucking deal. And that if you were able to see through my clothing while I was wet, it was somehow my personal fault. And so even though at that point I was old enough to know wear white underwear to the temple, so that way when you got wet, everything was white bra, white undies, white. I mean, honestly, my family felt like any bra or underwear other than the color white was a sin. That's how ultra conservative my family was. So I got cute undies when I was a toddler, but then as I got older, everything was white undies, white bra, white everything, white. And so I remember that first time that I got dunked and I came up, I was thoroughly embarrassed because it was very obvious that the wet jumpsuit that they gave me was clinging to my body, and you could see the outline of my bra and underwear. And then when I went, it was the young men's leaders in my ward or my bishop, or it was grown men that had to witness the ordinance. And so in order for that to happen, the way that it came down in that ordinance is that there was the one that was doing the reading, two witnesses, and the man in the font. Yes, Tanya, I completely agree with you. Skin toned under things always look better if there's going to be something that you get wet with, because then it's not as obvious. I agree with you 100%. But my Mormon parents felt like white was best. So for whatever reason, for more information, go read my book about how hard that was.
Black is Satan's color. You're not
Black
supposed
is
to wear
Satan's,
it.
black is Satan's color, whatever. And so anyway, so for me, it was 4 grown men watching me get wet and able to see through my clothing. And then later in my life, one of the men that had watched me numerous times was found guilty of child molestation charges. And so that was something that was very difficult. Yes, Vanessa, the white underclothing is apparently to represent that we are pure, that our underclothing represents sexual purity for whatever reason. So I wore white underwear with brown stains because I bled like crazy. So it's very uncomfortable. I actually have several clients that have come and spoken to me either about their children or about their own experiences that made them really uncomfortable in the temple. And yes, Tanya, like you said, Tanya says, I have unkind things to say about old men ogling or oogling wet teenagers, or ogling, whatever it is. Mason, you can correct me because he's
Ogling.
ogling and
But all 3 of them would be, I mean, understood. So
right. And so I think that there's a level of sexual tension that goes on because when I was a young women's leader, so I served as the young women's president for a while, one of the things we did to make sure the teenagers didn't ogle, oogle the wet female teenagers was we separated them. Like the young men were not allowed to be in the area that the baptisms were going on, while the young female teenagers were getting wet and their little jumpsuits were see-through. So instead of, and I'm going to add this picture here to the stage really quick. So what happens is the baptismal font inside of a Mormon temple, it has stairs going down into it. In Mormonism, the fonts are supposed to be below the ground level. So they have to be under the earth, because if you're dunked in an above the ground pool, you didn't go under the ground for that representation of death. And so all of the fonts in the temple are situated so that they are below the ground level. And then they're on the back of these 12 oxen. And if I remember correctly, Mason, correct me if I'm wrong, that the 12 oxen represent the 12 tribes of Israel or something coming together for this. And so Katie's laughing at some of the comments that are coming through here. And so anyway, what happens now is that they have changed it so that the teenage boys can now perform the baptism ordinance in the font. So we go from when I was a youth and when I was the young women's president. I was the young women's president. I got released by Mason 1 week after they called him to be the bishop in our ward in Killeen. So that would have been, Mason, what year? Like 16?
17.
2017. So in 2017, when I was the young women's president, the boys were not allowed to witness the females being or performing the baptisms for the dead because of our wet jumpsuits. But the females, the young women, were allowed to witness the young men getting baptized for the dead because of this issue. And then they switched it recently under, old man Nelson here, that the teenagers could perform those ordinances. The challenge for me, and I think they are now allowing women to witness as well, but the thing for me is that there are still 4 people in close proximity to the font that observes that the ordinance is done correctly. And usually those witnesses are either teen males or adult males. And my question is, why all of a sudden, when the rules were the young men couldn't even be in there, to now they can perform it? What's the difference? Because I guarantee those jumpsuits are still see-through. They have not double, triple lined or whatever those jumpsuits to make it more comfortable for those who do not want their body to be ogled or oogled or ogled. Yes, Katie, you raised your hand.
So when Hayden and I went, it was like the first time. I never wanted to go again after that. Everyone was there watching, unless they were getting changed out of it or into their jumpsuit. Everyone was there, even the boys.
Okay.
So they changed that again, or at least that's how.
Well, and I'm wondering if that might be like the geographical roulette, like stake president. Or Mason, go ahead, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so it's one of the points that I wrote down that I wanted to talk about is it's completely a local thing. There's no policy that says the boys can't watch. So some leader, probably a little bit more understanding, recognized this probably isn't the best situation. So boys, you need to sit down and not watch while this is going on. To add to that too, there's a huge stink by parents of, like you mentioned, women wearing underwear that can be seen or whatever. Nobody ever talks to boys about that. Now, not in the temple. Like if you were wearing blue underwear as a boy, there would be some issues with that too. But otherwise, you could wear whatever color underwear you wanted. You can wear boxers that always have lots of, fun designs or whatever on them. Nobody raises stink about it at all. But girls, that's different, right? There's no equality when it comes to those kinds of things.
Well, and I want to turn that over. The other thing that I want to say from my personal experiences is that when I was going through, there was so much pressure that I was supposed to have a spiritually uplifting or significant experience by entering the temple that I didn't want to be left out. So I remember now, if you've read my book, you know that Sarah was very much a compulsive liar and great at embellishing the truth, because I come from a long line of Lees, and maybe the James gene. I don't know if that's through the Lee gene or whatever. It's definitely through my dad's side of the family, though. So dad, grandma, and up. We're embellishing like my lineage. Like if you look at my family tree, it says exaggerator, exaggerator, exaggerator.
Who's the James gene? What is that?
That's dad's or papa's mom's side of the family. Anyway,
Oh.
long story short, in that lineage, we were known for our storytelling. Like we had some whoppers. And so I remember getting up and bearing my testimony in Sunday after the first time that I experienced the baptisms for the dead and saying, it was like I could feel the spirit of the person I was baptizing. I could feel like, oh, they were excited about it, or ooh, somebody was maybe a little bit nervous, or oh, somebody was super grateful. And I felt obligated to exaggerate and bring that miracle story to life, because when I did the baptisms for the dead, it was mostly boring. I didn't enjoy it. Being dunked over and over and over again was very scary for me. I did not like being held under the water, still don't like being dunked or held under the water. And so it was actually terrifying for me. But the pressure for it to be special was such that I thought stopped and then exaggerated to fit in or lied for the Lord. Yeah, Hayden, what is your story? Go ahead.
I'm just gonna go with that because I agree. When I wrote it actually down I put it in my notes for this conversation, but I didn't. When I say I felt the spirit in the temple, or when I felt the spirit when I was going to, like for Abby's, when we adopted Abby,
The
and
sealing
when
ceremony.
all of those things. I don't think it was necessarily the feeling of, oh, I can feel the spirit. I think it was just like for baptisms for the dead, when I was doing it, I felt like I was doing something good for other people. So I don't think it was the spirit I was feeling as much as it was good karma for doing something good. And for Abby's sealing ceremony, I don't think it was I felt an angel or I felt the spirit. I think I just felt love for a new sister. But instead of crediting the love that I'd felt for doing good things and for having a new sister, I credited all that for it's a sacred place.
Yeah.
And looking back, I wish that I didn't. And I wish that that we would have gotten here sooner so that I could kind of have that more maturity and I could have appreciated a little bit more how much it meant that Abby was part of our family now, and how much it meant that I was giving people with less opportunities in a way that was special to me.
Yeah.
I love that, Hayden, because you're talking about like spiritual autonomy and spirituality being defined as your ability to connect with other living creatures, humans, plants, animals, those types of things. I love that you've said that, because like for me, the sealing ceremony, which we will be talking about the sealing stuff in an upcoming episode, but for me, the sealing ceremony was like reassurance that no matter what happened in our lives, my adopted kids would never be taken away from me. Because now God knew that they were mine and we were good. And that really helped. You know, that really overshadowed what a miracle it was that we were able to connect in meaningful ways with non-biological children, and that we were a solid family unit where she could grow up and thrive without having to spiritually bypass or give all the credit for all the good things in our life over to God and all the bad credit to either we're being tried or we're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Now that you bring that up, it's kind of fucked up too. Because I mean, when I did the sealing ceremony, I was like 8 or 9-ish. So it wasn't, I mean, obviously I didn't comprehend it the way that I'm comprehending it now, but it's a little bit fucked up that the only way for you to reconnect with Abby once she died and you guys were all in heaven was if you did this ceremony. And if you didn't participate in this ceremony, she's got to go back to her shitty ass biological family just because you did not perform the ceremony for her, even though she grew up as your kid. You paid for her, you fed her, you got her medicine, all those things. It's really, I mean, obviously I'm thinking about it now again. It's really fucked up that that was what you had to do. And also on top of the we're crediting the good things in our lives. I see a lot of people when they accomplish something good, and they've worked for it, they're like, oh, well, I'm going to pray and thank God for this. But from my perspective, if you're working hard for something, and you achieve that, that's not God giving you that. You worked hard. You deserve the credit for that because it was not God who did it for you. It was you. And I've always kind of hated that about the church. And I think even a little bit of pride is good. I take pride in my acting. I take pride in how hard I work in the gym. I take pride when I was wrestling. All those things I worked hard for, and I deserve to be a little bit prideful for that because of how much work and how much time and effort I put into those
How-
things. But instead, it's more culturally acceptable if I credit that to God.
That's because you're an unbelieving apostate.
I am an unbelieving apostate, and I'm super sinful, and I'm a heathen, and I need to repent.
Well,
And
yeah,
you're gonna burn in hell. You're gonna burn in
At
hell.
least 30.
You're going to join the Westbrook family there. So the only correction, Hayden, that I have for that is your way of describing Abby's birth family. Just keep in mind, we don't know a lot about that. So
Yeah, that was just
calling Abby's birth family shitty ass because so of all of our adopted kiddos, Abby's birth parent story is heart-wrenching. The other birth mothers are just incredibly strong and whatnot. And with Abby's, it's a little bit more difficult. So our audience doesn't have all those details. So we want to be careful how we speak about birth families here. And just so you know, Michael agrees with you. As an adopted child myself, I kind of find the whole idea rather insulting. The fact that the only way that an adopted child, and I truly believed this within my Mormon construct, was the only way that an adopted child could be ours forever was if we performed this sacred ritual, because God couldn't recognize it otherwise. And to me, that's completely insulting. Our family believes in open adoptions as far as we're concerned. Once we adopt a child, the birth family is a part of our family as well. And that has served us very well for the healthy open adoptions that our family enjoys. Katie, do you want to? Robin Delgado gave us a thumbs up. Thank you so much. Big shout out to you. And Katie, do you have anything that you wanted to add to the conversation about your experiences doing baptisms for the dead in the temple?
Yeah, but first I want to say that that's like one of the biggest things I hated about like the celestial kingdom and everything. It was like everyone constantly taught me that if you didn't get into the celestial kingdom, you wouldn't remember your family and you wouldn't be able to see them. And if they got to the celestial kingdom and you didn't, then they could come down and see you, but you wouldn't remember them. You wouldn't know who they were.
I don't know that. Mace, do you have a reference for not remembering them? Because that's
what they tell us here.
So no, that might have been a message that Katie got. I'm certain some people get that message, right. But no, it's not doctrinal that we won't remember our families, just that we won't be with them. So, but yeah, if somebody's getting that message, that's not a healthy message.
No, right. Maybe they taught it to us to like ensure like for us to try our hardest to get there.
Oh sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Lots of the lessons that you get are manipulative. I actually have a couple of comments about that. So yeah.
Okay. So Hayden, what about you? Do you have any? Oh, Katie, keep going? I'm sorry. Keep going. Katie's giving me I'm sorry.
I said first I would like to say, Mom.
She's my daughter. Y'all see this? My daughter. Go ahead, Kay.
Anyway, for baptisms of the dead, like going back to what you said about the men being able to watch, that made me like really, really uncomfortable, especially with the teenagers, because as a victim of sexual assault, knowing that they would be able to look at me made me really, really uncomfortable and gave me quite a few flashbacks, which is one of the reasons I never wanted to go back after that one time. I only went once and don't ever want to go back. Also, I felt very, very out of place in the temple. I don't know what it was, but I felt so out of place when we were walking there too. It was.
I think that because of the way that our children today are taught a lot about identifying unhealthy emotional situations in our schools now, especially in our public schools. Like, we've seen that across all of the schools you guys have been in. They have kind of a very basic neuropsychological emotional awareness that the school counselors will go around and do in a lot of these districts. I think our kids had just that heightened awareness of this is not okay. And also, you had me as a mom to be like, here are your boundaries, and speak up when something makes you uncomfortable. And so I think that with that, because you were allowed to voice it more, both in school and at home, that
Mhm.
you guys were more in tune with situations that didn't really fit your personal authenticity. Now, having said that, I know that Mormonism kind of skewed that, and Dad and I supported a lot of that Mormonism, so it's obviously not perfect. But I feel like you guys definitely had more of an ability to come to Dad and I and be like, that was not fun, than Dad or I would have earlier on. And yes, Vanessa, I agree with you. They would scare us into achieving more. It was constantly, like Mason said earlier, religion was about the punishment, not about, like, it was all of these bad things will happen to you. You need us. Not a lot of autonomy. Yeah, Hayden, go ahead.
I was going to comment on Vanessa's comment too, but you should always I think you should always want to achieve more, but I don't think that scaring you into wanting to achieve more is at all the right way to go about it. I think it's about finding your motivation to achieve more. Like, I want to be a good person because there's too many people in the world that don't have the motivation to be good people, and it's ruining a lot of people's lives. So that's my motivation for wanting to be a good person. Or my motivation to go to the gym every day is because I got bullied for being small. So that's my motivation, but I shouldn't be scared into doing those things just because it's what's expected of me. I want to achieve those because when I achieve those, that means it's going I can it's going to teach me things. It's going to teach me how to work hard, how to find motivation, and how to be the best version of myself rather than scaring me into thinking it's my responsibility to do that.
Yeah.
Right. You're talking about making intentional decisions because they're important to you as a human, rather than making intentional decisions because God said so. And if I don't, all
Yes.
bad stuff's going to happen. All right.
Yes.
Any final thoughts? We are going to go ahead and start wrapping up. Mason, did you have any final thoughts as we
Yeah.
start up?
Yeah, just a couple. I just want Hayden to read what I had here for him.
Moral superiority loosens tongues.
So this was something that kind of came to me, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, and Sarah was like, "Ooh, I really like that." And so I just kind of been looking for the right time, but it harkens back to this when you said, Sarah, when you told the story about how you didn't get asked once why you didn't want to do baptisms. You got asked multiple times, and you got asked by people who have no business asking you. But the problem is that when you have a sense of moral superiority, so it was the young men's leader, or it was the bishop, or a bishop's counselor, or a young women's leader, all these people have built into their callings a sense of moral superiority. So they get to ask those kinds of invasive questions. And that's the problem, is that if you say, I don't want to do baptisms right here in the temple now, not the time to ask that question. Okay. It should be a simply, okay, and leave it be, not a delving into, well, what's going on? Because then if you actually tell the answer, well, it's because I'm bleeding, then they get all up in arms because you would mention something like that. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you just said that. Well, you asked. So this moral superiority really loosens tongues and lets people say things that they, or ask things that they have no business asking. And I see a lot of that when it comes to temple ordinances and activity in a religious organization. They'll say all kinds of things that they really have no business saying.
I really love that, Mason. And I'd like to add that. And as I do, I want to just put a shout out for the National Mental Health Crisis Hotline, 988. Please, if you are struggling or in a mental health crisis, call or text 988. I have done it myself. I had a mental health crisis several months ago, And I was like, whew, I don't have anybody to talk to right now, just the brain space I was in. And I texted 988. What I learned about their system is you cannot write them a book and then send it. You have to write it in like 2 to 3 sentences and hit send, and it will work with their system. And there are licensed professionals ready to respond to you. So if there are times where, people look at me and they're like, oh, you're a counselor, you're super healthy. If you really feel that way, I'm a human just like you. I'm just as vulnerable to have really difficult times in my life. Especially I've had a medically diagnosed nervous breakdown before. And so, yeah, there are going to be times in your life where the thoughts or the feelings that you have can be completely overwhelming. You do not have to be suicidal or homicidal to text this number. It can also be very helpful to call or text them when you are just feeling so overwhelmed and you need somebody to help walk you through calming that down and then referring you to a full-time provider, or connecting you with resources that are available in your community at low to no cost, for your continued mental well-being. So we definitely want to do that shout out. Mason, as you talk about moral superiority, one of the things, I don't think that most members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints would intentionally say or think that they are morally superior. While, us on the outside, we can look at it and go, oh, that's what it is. I don't think that when you're actively involved in any high demand religion that you necessarily intentionally feel better than others. I think that some people absolutely intentionally do, but that for most of us, we don't. But I would say that when we have that spiritual authority, that's what it really is in the church, because I hold the priesthood, or because I'm in this calling and therefore I'm a steward over these humans, that we really tend to elevate our expertise in ways that are not always healthy. Because I'm the bishop, it goes my way, because I'm the one that's receiving the spiritual guidance. There's a lot of pressure there. There's a lot of potential for abuse in that. I think that all of us at one point or another have utilized our authority in ways, Mason, you and I are parents. Guaranteed we've used our parental authority in ways that are not always perfect or healthy.
No way. Not ever.
Not ever. Yeah. See, look at Hayden's face back there, like, oh, I don't want to bet. Katie's like, I'm numbed out from this. I'm not even paying attention to you, Dad. So anyway, my point being that when you are approaching vulnerable populations in a position that you might have the better way, rather than that curious brain space of, I see that this is different for you. How can we approach it? You've really got to look at all of the contexts there. And the challenge that I experienced in Mormonism is because of the position that God called me to, that meant I had the right to cross ethical boundaries that I would not ever cross in other circumstances. And
Totally.
So if you are still a member, if you are in question, if you're in transition, or if you're all the way out, let's be gentle with those humans that are still on the inside. They are doing the best that they know how to do, for the most part. And while their moral justification for why they make those choices is really off-putting, keep in mind that chances are you were once there, either in that same context or outside of that same context, because I can speak for myself, and Mason, I'll speak for you, and if I'm wrong, you take over. But I think we've all done it when we've been in those positions of leadership within the Mormon purview. So, all righty. If I think we've got everything. Is there anybody else that has a question? Again, remember that if you want to leave us a tip for the show, telling us some things you'd like to see in the show, or if you would like to be a guest in the show, or you have a topic you want us to cover, you can leave us that tip by emailing us at daisygirlcommunications@gmail.com. You can also contact us or subscribe to our newsletters at daisygirlcommunications.com. If you want to leave us a monetary tip in order to support what we are doing here at the Daisy Girl Communications business and the Unpacking series that we have here at our YouTube channel and whatnot, we would love that. You can do so by scanning the Venmo code here. We have staff that we have hired, and we are absolutely determined to make sure that they are making the industry standard competitive rate and a livable wage. That is very important to us. So if you'd like to help us out with that, you are very welcome to throw us a couple bucks or even more than that. And please, by all means, if you feel like a nutty squirrel at some time, you are right at home here with the squirrely ADHD family of the Westbrooks. We love you so much. So thanks so much. And we will, oh, yep. And Katie's got the dog here. One more.
He's in a state of euphoria right now.
He is so happy because we're snuggling him. Henry says it has been a pleasure joining you. My poor little doggy here that has some brain damage. We will need to leave Henry, our mascot, his story on our website or on the blog so that you guys can all read about what a miracle puppy this guy is and how the advances in medical veterinary science have saved his life. So love you, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Deuces.